4,386 people closed their eyes to sleep on December 20th, 1987. Only 26 would open them again. This is not just a shipwreck, this is the deadliest peacetime maritime disaster in human history. While the Titanic killed 1,517 people, the Doña Paz claimed nearly 3 times that number. In the Tablas Strait, 100 kilometers south of Manila, a passenger ferry collided with an oil tanker. The ferry, the MV Doña Paz, carried between 3,000 and 4,000 people, nearly triple her designed capacity. Most were families traveling home for Christmas, most were asleep. The tanker, the Mount Vector, carried 1,041 tons of gasoline. When collision ignited that fuel, the sea caught fire. What followed was humanity's darkest maritime nightmare: a burning ship, burning water. Passengers choosing between dying in flames or jumping into inferno. A survival rate of 0.5%, only 26 people rescued. Only 24 crew members from the Doña Paz survived, none. Every single crew member died. The world called it Asia's Titanic. Time magazine labeled it the deadliest peacetime maritime disaster of the 20th century. But these titles barely capture what happened that night when the sea transformed into an ocean of fire, and an entire nation's maritime history changed forever. This is their story. The MV Doña Paz was built in 1963 in Hiroshima, Japan. Originally named Maritime, she served Japanese waters for 13 years before being sold to Philippine shipping company Sulpicio Lines in 1975. Renamed Doña Paz, a Lady of Peace, she became a flagship, connecting the Philippine archipelago's scattered islands twice weekly. By December 20, 1987, the ferry was overcrowded beyond imagination. The official manifest listed 1,493 passengers, but this was fiction. Military personnel boarded without tickets. Children under 4 traveled unlisted. Passengers purchased illegal tickets from crew members. Meanwhile, the Mount Vector, a 51.7-meter oil tanker with a 13-man crew, departed Bataan, carrying 8,800 barrels of gasoline for Caltex Philippines. The Vector was severely troubled, operating with an expired certificate of inspection expired December 7, no valid coastwise license, a defective rudder requiring 2 men to operate, unqualified officers, no radio operator, and no qualified lookout. The master held only a second mate certificate. At 20 to 30, both vessels approached the Tablas Strait near Dumoli Point. The weather was clear, visibility good, but neither ship saw the other coming. The Doña Paz had no functioning radio. The Vector's radar was broken. No emergency protocols existed. No evacuation drills had been conducted. Captain Eusebio Nazareno of the Doña Paz was reportedly watching a Betamax film in his cabin. Only an apprentice crew member monitored the bridge. Then came the impact. At 20 to 30, the Mount Vector's bow struck the starboard side of the Doña Paz with devastating force. Steel buckled, rivets snapped. Upon impact, friction ignited gasoline vapors inside the Vector's hold. An explosion erupted flames, leaping across the narrow space between vessels, engulfing the ferry in a wall of fire that rose thousands of meters. Passengers woke to darkness, smoke, and screaming. Philippine Constabulary Corporal Luzgardo Nido testified. The lights went out immediately. Officers had abandoned their posts. No one attempted to organize the evacuation. Life jackets were locked away in lower deck cabins, accessible only to crew members who had vanished into chaos. In minutes, the ship tilted dangerously. Within minutes, the upper decks where families crowded due to lack of space below became death traps as smoke filled the passageways. Passengers faced an impossible choice: stay and burn, or jump into burning gasoline spreading across the sea. The flames had turned the water into an inferno. Survivor Paquito Osobel recounted. The flames spread rapidly throughout the ship, and the sea all around the ship was itself afire. Thousands jumped. They burned in the water. Some found suitcases to cling to. Most drowned, most burned. The screaming gradually stopped. Survivors were too exhausted to cry anymore. At approximately 0:32 hours after collision, the Doña Paz slipped beneath the surface, descending 545 meters into darkness. The Mount Vector followed 4 hours later. In the burning water above, only 26 people remained alive, 24 Doña Paz passengers, and 2 Vector crew members. Not a single member of the Doña Paz's 58-person crew survived. The temperature at collision point exceeded 1,000 degrees Celsius. Gasoline vapors inside the Mount Vector's hold ignited on impact. Fire erupted from the tanker's fractured hull and leapt across to the Doña Paz in seconds. Passengers woke to darkness, all lights failed, and chaos. Philippine Constabulary Corporal Luzgardo Nido testified. The lights went out immediately. Absolute darkness. Crew members were running around in panic, not giving orders, making no attempt to organize anyone. Emergency equipment was inaccessible. The crew disappeared into confusion. Within minutes, the ship tilted dangerously. Flames spread through wooden superstructure like a torch. The burning gasoline had transformed the water into an inferno, flames extending perhaps 100 meters in all directions, a deadly circle of fire surrounding both sinking vessels. The burning gasoline had transformed the water into an inferno, flames extending perhaps 100 meters in all directions, a circle of fire surrounding both sinking vessels. Passengers faced an impossible choice: burn aboard ship or jump into burning water. Most jumped. They plunged into flames, their skin scorching instantly. Survivors swam through burning fuel, using suitcases and debris as flotation, desperately escaping the circle of fire. The screaming was deafening, then gradually faded as survivors exhausted themselves in the scorching water. At 0:32 hours after collision, the Doña Paz descended 545 meters into darkness. The Mount Vector followed 4 hours later. Above the wrecks, only 26 people remained alive, clinging to floating debris in a sea slowly cooling from the fires. Every single crew member of the Doña Paz was dead. Only 24 passengers survived the entire ferry's overload of thousands. Captain Melencio Barranca of the MV Don Claudio witnessed the explosion on the horizon at approximately 20:45. He saw thick flames and a lot of smoke rising from the Tablas Strait and immediately ordered maximum speed toward the disaster. By the time the Don Claudio arrived, approximately 1 hour after the collision, both vessels were engulfed in flames. The Doña Paz was already sinking. Barranco's crew threw nets over the railings. Miraculously, they found survivors, 26 people alive. 24 were passengers from the Doña Paz, 2 were Vector crew members. Most had severe burns from jumping into flaming water. Doctors aboard the Don Claudio treated them desperately. One survivor, a 14-year-old girl, Valeriana Dumas, would later reveal herself in 2012, 25 years after the disaster, because she had never been officially recorded as a survivor. But the rescue came too late to help thousands. By 23 o'clock, Philippine maritime authorities had no knowledge of any disaster. No distress signal had been sent from either ship. The Doña Paz had no functioning radio. The first notification came 8 hours later, when the Don Claudio contacted the Coast Guard. Another 8 hours passed before organized search and rescue operations could begin. By then, both ships had been sunk for 24 hours. Search helicopters found almost nothing: no bodies, no visible wreckage, no oil slick. The wrecks had sunk to 545 meters, far too deep for surface visibility. The tragedy was invisible, as one U.S. Air Force spotter reported. We covered about 100 miles of sea area, and except for maybe a piece of driftwood, we saw absolutely nothing. The Philippine Coast Guard's Marine Board of Inquiry released its findings on November 3, 1988, nearly a year later. Their conclusion was unequivocal. The Mount Vector was unseaworthy and a floating hazard to navigation. The Vector's violations were catastrophic. Expired certificate of inspection expired December 7, 1987. No valid coastwise license. A defective rudder requiring 2 men to operate. Unqualified officers. no radio operator, and no qualified lookout. The master held only a second mate's certificate, not a captain's license. The vessel was literally operating illegally while carrying 1,041 tons of gasoline. But the Doña Paz was not blameless. Investigation revealed only one apprentice crew member monitoring the bridge during collision. Captain Eusebio Nazareno was watching a Betamax film in his cabin. Other officers were drinking beer and watching television in crew quarters. Survivor Salvador Baxel testified of upbeat music from the recreation quarters. Luzgardo Nido corroborated laughter and loud music on the bridge. The Doña Paz's radar wasn't functioning or wasn't being monitored. No radio communications were attempted. The ship had no functioning distress system. When collision occurred, no warning was sounded, no evacuation organized, no emergency protocol activated. The crew panicked and disappeared. Additionally, the ferry was carrying 3,000 to 4,000 passengers, nearly 3 times her rated capacity, because Sulpicio Lines had no enforcement of passenger limits. Safety protocols were non-existent. Life jackets remained locked away. Lifeboats were non-functional. The 58-member crew received no evacuation training. The result was inevitable: 4,386 deaths, a 0.5% survival rate. The Board of Inquiry blamed the Vector, but both companies Sulpicio Lines and Vector Shipping were grossly negligent. Legal battles raged for decades. Philippine courts eventually ruled Sulpicio Lines solely responsible 1992, and Vector Shipping liable 2008, 21 years after the disaster. But most victims never received adequate compensation. The Doña Paz disaster transformed maritime safety worldwide. The International Maritime Organization cited it as evidence of urgent need to strengthen global maritime regulations. SOLAS, the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, was comprehensively amended. New regulations mandated mandatory safety drills before passenger ship departure, improved emergency instructions, better life jacket storage, and reinforced watertight compartments. The Philippine Maritime Authority implemented sweeping reforms, strict passenger capacity enforcement, rigorous vessel inspections, elevated crew training standards, and emergency preparedness requirements. The Philippines, which had suffered the deadliest peacetime maritime disaster in history, became determined to prevent recurrence. The 26 survivors carried permanent physical and emotional scars. Valerie Ana Dumar, only 14 years old, survived 8 hours clinging to a suitcase in burning water, never officially recorded as a survivor until 2012. Salvador Baxel, 44, jumped into burning gasoline with his daughter Eludia, both sustaining severe burns. Survivor Luzgardo Nido later stated, "I thought I was done for. I thought I would die." Many never returned to the sea. Some became maritime safety advocates, dedicating their lives to preventing future tragedies. In 1995, a memorial was erected in Cap Balagan where 108 final passengers boarded, featuring a sculpture by artist Alejandro Villarin. For 27 years, families gathered to honor their dead. Then, in April 2022, the Diocese of Calbayog demolished it for commercial development. The primary physical memorial to 4,386 victims was destroyed. Today, 4,386 people are memorialized primarily in hearts and memories. The lessons endure. Never prioritize profit over safety. Regulation and enforcement are not optional. Equipment is meaningless without training. Communication saves lives. Every human life has value. The maritime industry learned these lessons. The world did too. On December 20th every year, survivors and families gather to remember. They bring flowers, they speak names, they refuse to let the world forget. Many survivors are now in their 70s. Each year, some don't return. Each year, living witnesses diminish. But their testimony remains in maritime regulations, strengthened because of their suffering. The Doña Paz rests 545 meters below the Tablas Strait Tomb Memorial, a permanent reminder of what happens when safety is compromised. 4,386 people died. Only 26 were rescued. A nation was traumatized, but from tragedy came change. From negligence came regulation. From 4,386 deaths came lessons that continue saving lives today. 4,386 names, 4,386 stories. One night that changed maritime history forever.